Hey, welcome to another episode, Lessons on Learning. These are quick fire videos, usually 15 minutes or less, just focusing on how adults and young adults learn and being able to use that information to really create effective and engaging training sessions for our own learners. So today I want to talk to you about three critically influencing factors that can really affect how a learner learns, how easily they learn, how much they adapt to the learning, and most importantly, how well the learning sticks so that they can implement it. Now, these factors have got very little to do with what you do as an educator. It's not about your delivery or your methodology. It's really they're factors that the learner brings into the room themselves. And what's important about them is, although it's very important to recognize them, there's not a great deal that we can do to control them, but it's worth figuring out what they are. So let's get straight into it. The first critically influencing factor that a learner brings into the room, the factor that has a big effect on their learning effectiveness, is their own natural ability. And what we're talking about here is their intrinsic ability to be able to do something. Now, that could be physicality, it could be coordination, it could be dexterity, or it could be mental aptitude. We all have things that we find easier to do than something else. We all have an intrinsic natural ability to be able to do some things slightly easier, slightly better, slightly quicker than other things. And our learners are no exception. Take me, for instance, when I was at school, from a mental acuity point of view, I had no problem at all with words. I used to enjoy words. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed writing. Obviously, I enjoyed speaking. But words really made sense for me, and I could grasp concepts quite quickly. Numbers, however, that was something completely different. I had a real issue with numbers. And even today, I find it very difficult to hold numbers in my head, to be able to manipulate them and work with them. And so I really have a much more natural ability for words and much less of a natural ability for numbers. And even physically, there are some things that I can do that I find very easy to do. I find very easy to be able to manipulate and to change and to alter. And there are other things where I'm just all fingers and thumbs, and it doesn't matter how hard I try, everything takes a lot more time, energy, and effort. And it's the same when your learners come into your room. So depending on the subject that you're teaching or the task that you're wanting to share with them, there will be learners that come in with a naturally high ability that makes it much easier, much more enjoyable, and much more effective. And there'll be other learners that, for a variety of reasons, are just finding it much more difficult due to just a general lack of natural ability. But it's only in that particular subject. It could be something completely different in a new subject. So be aware that don't congratulate yourself too much if a learner is really flying through the class and really making fantastic progress. Yes, it could be partly down to your teaching, but it could also be partly down to the fact that they just have an intrinsic natural ability for what it is that you're teaching or wanting them to do. Equally, don't beat yourself up too much either if a learner is really struggling to get a concept or to manage a task. It might have nothing at all to do with your teaching ability. It might have a lot to do with that learner's natural intrinsic ability or lack thereof. Okay, let's have a look at the second influencing factor that learners often come into the room with, and that is something that we call prior knowledge. I'm just going to do a shortened version of it here so it doesn't take up all the screen. Prior knowledge. And again, this could be something that a learner has learned in a previous lesson. It could be something that they've experienced in a previous situation, something that's been taught to them by a parent, a guardian, a friend, or a colleague. But you have no idea what that prior knowledge is until you start engaging with that learner. Not unless you decide to invest some time and effort into pre-assessment or prior knowledge assessment, pre-learning with feedback, that kind of thing. But the prior knowledge that a learner has is something that we have no control over and no influence over, because obviously it's stuff that's happened before we started engaging with them. Now, if it just so happens that a learner has got a high degree of prior knowledge or prior experience in a particular subject matter, then naturally this is going to have an effect on their ability, and that's going to create more effective learning experiences for them. They're going to be able to pick things up a little easier, work through problems a little bit quicker, and the information is going to embed a little bit more effectively as well. So prior knowledge is something that a learner will come to the room with. They'll either have a lot or a little, depending on their experiences and the subject matter. And again, it's something that we have very little control over. Last but not least is the learner's own motivation toward the subject that we're teaching, their own particular motivation toward the subject that we're teaching. And I'm a great believer in the fact that you can only motivate learners so far. You can only do so much. In fact, I strongly believe that it's, rather than trying to motivate learners ourselves, what we should try and do is create an environment and circumstances in which the learner can self-motivate. But either way, a learner's going to come into our room, and depending on a variety of different circumstances and the subject matter that we're teaching and how they're feeling, they're going to either feel very motivated and excited towards this subject, or they're not. And that's going to have a very big effect on the effectiveness of their learning. So take me, for instance, when I went into my English language classes, English literature classes, into my art classes, into my wood shop or woodworking classes, I was very highly motivated towards those things. And so the learning naturally became much more effective. But when it involved going into the more theory-based classes, the numerical classes like mathematics and physics, my motivation was already pretty low. I really wasn't in the right mood for it, and so it really affected how well I learned, regardless of how good or bad or indifferent the teacher was. I want to go a little bit deeper on this thing about motivation as well, and just kind of explore it a little bit more as well. So the motivation is controlled by three things, really. First of all, it's controlled by the value that a learner will put on that information. How much do they value that information? So for me, for instance, I knew I had no future in numbers. I didn't want to be a mathematician. I didn't want to be an accountant. At the time, I had no particular interest in science, although now I do. But at the time, I couldn't really see any value in numeracy. And so therefore, my motivation was low. It's the same thing in whatever task that you're teaching. You might be teaching a particular aspect of a subject or a particular part of a task. And the learner, for whatever reason, they just might not see any value in that. You know, I don't want to bake bread. I want to bake cakes. I don't want to cut hair. I want to color hair. I don't want to do this. I want to do that. And so they don't see much value in it. Now, you do have a little control over this. You can help learners to see the value in what it is that they're learning by talking about what's in it for them and what benefit and advantages there are to learning it, providing, of course, that you believe that there is value in it to them. So there is a little bit of influence in that, but if they come in and they perceive this information as being low value for them, we're not saying that the information is not valuable, they just don't value it themselves, then their motivation is going to be relatively low. The next thing that will influence their motivation is their own personal self-confidence. How confident are they, or how confident do they expect to feel with this subject matter? So again, let's go back to the numbers. When I went into the maths class, I didn't feel very confident because I didn't think I was very good at numbers, and therefore I didn't put a lot of effort and energy and investment into the numbers. Therefore my results were always pretty poor, and that knocked my confidence even further. So when I went into the maths lesson, I was already pretty sure that I was not going to be any good at it. I'm a hairdresser, and within hairdressing, it's long hair, for instance, putting hair into buns and pin-ups. I just don't feel very confident in that, even right now, and that affects the quality of the learning, not the quality of the teaching, the quality of the learning. Is this making sense, my friends? And last but not least, it sounds a bit weird, but The other thing that'll have a big effect on their self-confidence is just their mood. It's just their mood. You know, the reality is that a learner might come into our lesson and for whatever reason, they're just not in the mood. You know, they're just not feeling it. Something could have happened outside of our control, outside of our knowledge, and their mood is not one that's conducive to learning. They're not particularly open or feeling courageous or experimental. Equally, their mood could be really buoyant, really energized, you know, and that could affect their self-confidence, which affects the quality of their learning. So all of these things we have very limited control over, but they have a massive influence on the quality of the learning. I keep saying that because this has got nothing to do with the quality of your teaching. These are factors that are somewhat outside of our control and outside of our influence, but they exist nonetheless, and they will have an effect on the whole atmosphere of our class. So recognize them and respond to them. When you recognize natural ability, or maybe even a lack thereof of natural ability, you might be able to adjust the delivery in some way or adjust the support that you offer so that you can either give people the freedom to fly or give them the extra support that they need. When it comes to prior knowledge, perhaps there's some questioning techniques or some pre-assessment techniques that you can do that will help you establish prior knowledge and put systems in place for those who lack it. And when it comes to motivation, again, I'll say this again, I'm not sure how well we can motivate learners, but we can provide a great environment for them to become self-motivated. So maybe giving them a reason to value the information, giving them the support and celebration that encourages their self-confidence, and doing what you can to make your class lively and fun and entertaining, so perhaps it lifts their mood or at least maintains their mood. So they're the things that you can do to counteract some of these factors, but ability, natural ability or lack thereof, prior knowledge, high or low, motivation, kind of high or low again. These are all factors that are slightly outside of your control, but will have a big effect on the quality of the learning that takes place in your room. So be aware of them and perhaps you can respond to them. Look, if this has been useful, please make sure that you drop a comment in the comment box below. If there is a video that you'd like to watch or a subject matter that you'd like me to cover, again, just drop that in the comments and I'll do a quick video on that as well if I am able. Please like the channel, subscribe to it if you haven't done already. And if you know anybody that might value this information or it might be useful to them, please let them know and have them subscribe as well. The more subscriptions I get, the more I feel encouraged to do stuff like this, and I do enjoy it. So listen, thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful and I will see you on the next episode of Lessons in Learning. Take care.